And now oh, yep, we should be live now. Oh wait, let me put that on. All right. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Now we're fucking. Yeah. All right. Well, that was a fucking pain. But yeah. Okay. It only took 3 minutes compared to last time, right? I'm already happy about this. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Literally, dude. Yeah. But 3 minutes is three fucking minutes, man. I'm proud. I'm proud of ourselves. Yeah. Exactly. Oh yeah. So dude, we did it together, bro. We did it together. Yeah, exactly. You know, we rise and fall together. All right. Yeah. All right. So let's start us off, man. It's well, happy International Day of Slayer, I guess. First of all, yeah, big crazy. Oh, okay. Yeah. Um, and obviously, I think you know, obviously, Rain in Blood will always be the most famous one, but this is the one I really gravitate to the most. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, like everyone, you go through the Iron Maiden, the Metallica, even Anthrax. Obviously, we're about the same age, so thrash metal revival was a big thing, and obviously, you go through the things, and then you get to this. Mm. Yeah. Wait, shit! Some guy says that they're not that they can't fucking hear you. What the? How the fuck did... Bro, last time we could fucking hear you perfectly fine. Shit. Yeah, oh my god, we put on the video. There's always a fucking problem with this stupid shit. Okay, let me see. Wait, normally I can hear. No audio from the guy in the Slayer shirt. Uh, oh wait, he is quiet or I'm quiet? MS. Okay, you're quiet. For some reason I can hear you absolutely fine though. Mm. Yeah, I put on your volume. Yeah, I put on my volume, like your volume, really high on my end, so it kind of comes through. Oh, the guy in the Slay show is barely audible. Yeah. No, I think now it's better. Yeah, it should be good at this point. Just got to make sure that you know I'm just gonna keep you really fucking loud on the thing. It might wreck my ears a bit. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, we were saying like this is pretty much the patrician's choice of the best Slayer album. Right? Are you there? Can you hear me? But yeah, because you probably have your the stream on audio. This guy says MSG. Oh damn. Still. Right. So both guys, yeah, still nothing. Oh my god, I fucking hate. Um, Let me just check quickly. Just go through the fucking options because this OBS is so stupid. Okay. Uh, let's see. I'm gonna add an audio capture, audio input capture. Wait, or was it audio output? Audio output capture. Let's see. Device default. So whatever goes into my SSL2 should be all right. Now they should be hearing it. Can
Can
you
you
hear
hear
me?
me?
Can Mag and MS hear Mac now?
The two people that are listening to this,
Yeah, live. All right.
can they hear me at all? Like, am I coming through?
That did it. Yes, perfect. Perfect. Well done.
Okay.
Nice. Wait, if the guys were on here, if I
Okay.
press yeah, that's perfect. Fucking hell. All right. Let's get to it. So yeah, why is this the patrician's choice in terms of Slayer albums?
At Slayer, at their most technical, at their most compositional, it was the last album on Metal Blade, and it was um before they realized like, we can have a bigger kind of career, because I do think going forward with Rain and Blood and the subsequent albums on American Recordings, that it was about selling records more so than the music. I think this was like, there could historically there could have been like two paths where if say they'd never signed to American Recordings and they would have kept going in this vein, they probably would have actually tried to top this album. But instead of that, they start getting this reputation that they're like the fastest band, the heaviest band, and that was because of the later albums. If people heard Hell Awaits with the production of Rain and Blood, or I would even say like South of Heaven, if Hell Awaits had South of Heaven's production, I think it would be their like lauded as their greatest album. But for some people, they think that a lot of these songs might like meander too much with a lot of like the more adventurous songwriting. But I think that not a lot of time was spent on songs like in the middle. Like, can you tell me a riff from the middle of Raining Blood? Like, what's the riff real quick to Reborn?
Oh, I couldn't. The only one I ever remember. This is a bit of a funny one because, back in the day, because those two songs, what do you call it? Raining Blood and Angel of Death were so popular that on the LimeWire days, when you download, for example, Raining Blood, you would get the end of what was the song before it? Do you want to?
Before what?
Before Raining
Epidemic?
Blood.
Or no? Oh fuck! Oh God! I know the exact song that you're Postmortem.
Yeah, I think so. Whatever, dude. But I remember a lot of times, because this happened to a lot of people I knew when we were listening to it in the car or whatever. Being teenagers, and that a lot of those kind of pirated versions would have like the last riff of whatever I think probably Postmortem into Raining Blood, and I think that's literally like the only like non-Angel of Death or Raining Blood part I can actually remember.
Yeah, it was Postmortem. So that song is sometimes actually, there's a reason that song is kind of included, is because it is kind of like a preamble to Raining Blood. But for me, if I were to say like the songs that I would have to remember, it would be songs like Piece by Piece, Altar, Sacrifice, Jesus Saves. I can't remember Reborn or Epidemic. Like some of the songs in the middle of this album, like Criminally Insane, I remember because of the remix that they basically made like almost like a rap version of it. But yeah, no, it seemed like it's kind of ironic that this is their shortest album, and yet there's still filler on it.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know how that could possibly happen. I guess it's like you have to fill out the rest of the length, but with Hell Awaits, I don't think that there's anything that's out of place or anything like that, because, and I think one of the beautiful things about the album is it's bookended. So it does almost tell like a complete story, because Hardening of the Arteries has the riffs from the beginning of Hell Awaits, and that's how it ends. So it's more of like a complete piece, whereas, Raining Blood just kind of, again, it's like a roller coaster, and you can listen to it over and over and over. And that's how they had it, is with the cassette of it. It was just the same album on both sides, so you could just flip it and listen to it over and over. But also the fact that, I mean, if anybody knows me at this point watching this channel, I prefer longer songs. I write longer songs within my own music. And so songs like At Dawn They Sleep or Crypts of Eternity, I mean, there's a lot going on in those songs. The fact that Tom is still playing bass with his fingers. It's the patrician's choice, because the patrician would be able to recognize that there's so much more depth to this album than something that you can put on for 26 minutes and repeatedly listen over and over and over and not really remember anything but the first to the last song.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, also, Hell Awaits, I'm sure it's not as tight as Rain in Blood, but this is, I think it feels to me like this is the last time that Tom ever cared about his bass playing. Because he's got some fantastic parts.
Oh yeah, there's multiple theories on that. I think I have at least three. One of them is that the Hellowaits kind of broke him as far as like writing went, being a fingerstyle bass player. Two, which kind of branches off, is that on subsequent albums, people like Kerry King and Rick Rubin came to Tom and told him like, "Hey, we need you to be more accurate, or these songs are faster, so we need you to play with a pick." I've heard that even Rain in Blood has him playing with his fingers, but that was the last time he ever played with his fingers. And three, which is probably my favorite one because it's just so sad, Kerry doesn't like bass players. Like his favorite idea, and he's gone on record as saying this, his favorite idea of a bass player is Ian Hill from Judas Priest. Now, if you know anything about Ian Hill, the way that Ian Hill performs and plays, he has a spot in his stage where he stands, does not move, and doesn't really play anything. If you want to hear something really funny, go listen to the bass to Painkiller.
Yep.
There is nothing going on.
It's because Don Airey played the bass. Ian Hill didn't actually play the bass on it. He didn't have the technical skills.
That's even worse.
Yeah, it's
because
like,
the
it's a Moog synthesizer.
Oh my, that explains a lot. Because there is no, it's literally just playing root notes. Yeah. And so Kerry is hugely influenced by Judas Priest, and so he's like, "Oh, the ideal bass player is somebody that can get out of the way of my perfect guitar riffs."
Yeah.
Which makes no sense because he's also influenced by Iron Maiden, and Steve Harris wrote the lion's share of everything and is an amazing bass player. So I don't get that. But it's a shame that like the Hellowaits was kind of like Tom's last hurrah, or right, like any time that he ever really got to show off doing anything that was counterpoint to what the guitars were doing.
Yeah, and even sometimes, you know, I'm thinking like the second half of At Dawn They Sleep, when, you know, the kind of strong, you know, the A-B strong song structure breaks down, and they're all doing these harmonies, and like Tom kind of comes up with like his own third harmony, like underneath the main two. It's like a lot of really.
Do you mean like the main riff at the top where da 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 da, and then like he's adding that on top? Yeah. Are you talking about that riff?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
I'm talking later when, because this is something that's so interesting. Whenever you go through that album, pretty much any idea in death metal that exists in death metal exists on that album, and even the Oriental melodies on that song. There's like this weird little break at one point.
Are you talking about where it's just like one guitar like repetition?
The ending is kind of like harmonized. If you have the stream up, I could probably try to wait now. Up.
I've got the album up.
Let me see. Well, let me see if you can hear this, because I know you've got the stream. Let me see. Maybe this might work because it should be capturing, you know, all my output. So
I should be able to hear it through your Discord.
Did you hear this?
No, I don't. I mean, if I click on the stream, it'll just echo.
Okay, that's a shame.
And then like he's adding. Just give me a timestamp. Yeah, are you talking about that riff?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
I'm talking later when.
Or do you have the actual? Did you pick it out yourself?
Album, yeah, I pretty much any idea. You know, it's not an issue. That exists in death metal. We'll figure that for next time how to get good audio. And even the Oriental melodies in the song. There's like this weird little break at one point. I keep listening to it.
Are you talking about where it's?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a million riffs on that second half, right? But yeah, if you have the stream up, I could probably, you know, ultimately, my point being is that every single idea.
I've got the album up.
Yeah, we'll listen to it. Let me see if, you know, my point being is that every single fucking thing that, you know, pretty much happened in death metal or black metal happened to some way here.
Yeah, it really kind of makes you think.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I know that a lot of people, and this was immediately going to come up, because I also have petitioned this for the longest time. I think this is death metal's greatest album because I think of just how important it is, even more so than fucking Seven Churches. This came out before Seven Churches, so I'm sure the Possessed guys actually heard this.
Oh yeah, of
This
course.
came out in April of '85. I know for a fact that they heard this fucking album, and it was super influential to them. Everything from how you dressed with like all the spikes and shit like that, into later everybody's wearing like sweatpants and shit. That went through both death and black metal.
Mm.
The guitars they're all playing really high-end BC Riches at this point. You know, Jeff's got a bitch, Carrie's got a Warlock, and Tom has a wave bass. And then they would eventually go further with the company and have their own, like, you know, they would customize their models that would end up pointier and pointier with pointier headstocks, reverse headstocks. The double bass that occurs on this album, I mean, just think on At Dawn They Sleep, the drum break. That's before Angel of Death. You know, before the famous drum break on Angel of Death, you have it on At Dawn They Sleep. All of the craziness that would happen with all of the solos and the Kaler tremolos occurs on this album. This album is the blueprint and the DNA of everything going forward. Oh, yeah. This is like patient zero for a virus that everybody has.
So this is my real question. So this is what interested me a lot more, because, you know, we can trace the influence of this album. It would be like 10 books in and of itself. Even I think there are influences that go way beyond metal at this point. But what's more interesting to me, do you think that there's a band in extreme metal that was ever able to kind of go around the influence that this had?
It would have to be some band that was like adamant on sounding heavy metal. It would have to be some band that was adamant on like, oh, we don't listen to anything past like 1983. And it possibly was also bands that may not have had access to that this album, as weird as this sounds, because this album was put out on Metal Blade, and I just found this out just a second ago. Combat Records also like pumped this album too when it had come out. So like you had like two huge companies spreading this album around. But if you want, like, I can't think of a band, like, I don't know why the immediate thing that's coming to my mind is it would have to be something very foreign and isolated.
Yeah, you know, honestly, yeah, literally, there is nothing, and if it's something, and if it ever existed, it's something that we haven't heard, probably.
Because this album is in, you know, everywhere. Yeah. Now, the production's not everywhere, although some do try to replicate it, you know, because this was the whole thing at that time with speed metal, is that everybody wanted to do the whole reverb heavy, loud ass vocals and kind of almost like cavernous type of production because of Merciful Fate and bands like that. And you have Bill Matoyer on this album. He was a huge producer and engineer guy that was on a great many things on this album. That was the sound for a lot of people going forward. But there's a reason Slayer would become known as this really dry, mid-heavy guitar sound band. Like, how do I describe this? Going forward, it was nothing but guitars. The three main things that you heard in a Slayer song were the like snare and the hi-hat and the kick drums, Tom's vocals, and the guitars. Obviously no bass because it just blends right in there with the fucking guitars. But I couldn't say of it. I couldn't think of any album that wouldn't be unaffected by this. Unless I suppose that you would be like purposely a Christian album that, you know, would have nothing to do with something because it says hell. That would be my only.
Because there's a guy whose MS says something really interesting. It says the Celtic Frost. That could be one, honestly.
Well, yeah, because coming before it, I mean,
it's a bit of a trick.
Yeah, they're not going to be. I don't think I don't think Tom ever really listened to Slayer.
Nah, dude, I think he stopped. Like, I think the heaviest he ever got personally, apart from his own music, was like Discharge. I think that's when he stopped caring about others. Probably that point.
Yeah, like years before.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
Um,
he was done. He was
that's,
done in '82, I think, as as a fan of metal, if that makes sense.
well, that's the thing about somebody like Tom G. Warrior. I should clarify that I've kind of had issue with is that um, the guy is more coming from like an artistic but like pretentious. I know I'm fairly pretentious, but in a way that I don't like pretentious artsy fartsy type of way going forward.
Yeah,
Like to Megatherion is this avant-garde artistic statement in a lot of ways.
exactly. I mean, you look at what he did after. Yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah, no, he did great after that album.
yeah. All right, so back to our Slayers. I mean, I think everyone in the black metal scene, Norway, for that, I think was it Euronymous or maybe it was like Metallion from the Slayer mag who was saying that like when they heard Hell Awaits, that was when they knew that things were really fucking on because everyone's like, yeah, but they were really into Venom and Venom invented the word black metal, but Venom were not even a tenth as serious or as aggressive as this.
And even funnier than that you bring up that is I don't know necessarily that the black metal guys, and I could be completely wrong, were entirely as competent as musicians to write something like this. Now they've written great stuff, and again, I could be completely ignorant on that. I still try to have to listen to a lot of the black metal stuff, but again, I think um, this album was definitely like it was going to take time and effort to learn how to play some of these songs. It's not just like the Iron Maiden, Judas Priest type riffing of Show No Mercy, which is also still an avenue you can go by. But Hell Awaits, I mean, it's going to take, because you have to like start to think like, all right, I've got to be able to count in like odd time. I think the beginning of At Dawn They Sleep goes from like 9/8 to 10/8 and like keeps going back and forth between like really weird time signatures there. They probably have no idea like when I say 9/8 like what the fuck that means. Like they probably do now, but not then.
No, I think
But also too, if
you
you
guys were very good musicians, but maybe not in the
oh no,
80s.
they were. I'm not saying they weren't. Good.
I'm just saying, I think for extreme metal to really catch up to this album in general, not just the Norway guys or whatever, I think it really took maybe like very late 80s at the earliest, early 90s for everyone else to kind of catch up to this technically and like production wise and everything. Because when I think about anything else, like any other death metal albums in the 80s, I mean, shit, Larry Lowland was very fucking competent in Possessed, but that's about it, really.
And unfortunately, he didn't really write anything. Most of the stuff still came from Mike because Larry, I mean, it's very clear that, especially with him being later in Primus, I would say some of Larry's best work would be more on like Blind Illusions, The Sane Asylum. I mean, Seven Churches is amazing, but I know probably for a fact that Mike wrote most of that.
Yeah, I mean,
Mike Terrea.
Larry said that he never cared for Possessed. I think,
Yeah,
the singer in Primus, the bassist guy, he didn't really care for Blind Illusion as well. It was just something they enjoyed doing, but it was like a stepping stone for them. So yeah, it definitely took like 85, probably 3-4 years until at least piece of time to catch up to this technically, really.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
That would be like the next evolution in a way of like. But the funniest thing is like there's very few bands that even would hear Atheist and actually take that going forward. Suffocation did because they were huge Atheist fans. But in like 88, 89, when I think Piece of Time was being written and played, like that was beyond even Hell Awaits, how technical that fucking shit was. Because, I mean, Roger was like a billion times the bass player. He was a bass player compared to Tom.
Yeah, of course.
Tom isn't really like a bass player. He's more like a rhythm guitar player that plays bass.
I mean, that's not a knock on him. He like at least on this album, I think this is definitely
He was a bass player on this album.
yeah. That's like the first and the last time. That's the one that always shocks me, and I think it gives so much more to this music, and it's one of the elements of this album that has stayed underappreciated because everyone you talk to, I think this is something that goes beyond kind of like any analysis, but loud bass as metal is always a good thing. We love to hear the bass
Yeah.
in every genre. We absolutely love it. We crave it. And so this kind of like obsession that metal has to, even to this day to an extent, in a different form, of kind of like tucking the bass away. Now they tuck it into the rhythm guitar tone. Before you'd have to fucking fight the drums. But here they managed to get that mix perfectly. The first time ever in an extreme metal context. And it's such a shame that it never continued like with that much. Like not enough bands really took on that idea of like, hey, it's good to have the bass loud up and that we can hear.
It would become it would take a while for bands later in death metal and even like speed metal to be able to like hear it without playing a pick like fingerstyle. Would take a while because it would take people that were in like jazz fusion bands to come in and show people like, oh no, you can apply it in this context. This album is kind of weird because yeah, it is Tom, I mean, playing and singing two parts that are almost like again counter to what he's singing. So it's probably difficult for him to possibly play any of these songs, and there's a reason why they don't play a song like Crypts of Eternity anymore.
Yeah,
The last time they played it was 85.
That's absolutely
which is one of my favorites.
Yeah. I'm going to say something that might be kind of another, I mean, not super controversial statement, but this actually has my favorite, Tom vocal performance ever. He's got the very, okay, it does get a bit cliche, the very kind of ranting thrash metal style at times, but I think just his tone, it's perfect. On the title track, the way that use that kind of demonic voice in the background, those pitch shifted vocals underneath his like actual vocals, gives it almost kind of death growl quality. And he's such a fantastic lyricist. God, the writing is absolute perfection.
I'd have to go back and see necessarily like because I'm not sure entirely like who wrote what lyrically. I know more on who wrote
Sorry,
as
that wasn't Tom. No, I remember Tom can only really do serial killer lyrics. That's like his entire fucking thing. Yeah.
So
You know.
yeah, no, I've got it pulled up. Like Jeff wrote songwriting wise all but Praise of Death. Carrie wrote Hell Awaits, Kill Again. Praise of Death, obviously, that's the one that he actually came and then helped to write Crypts of Eternity. And then lyrically, Carrie wrote, the first three. And then, what is it? Necrophiliac and Crypts of Eternity. Jeff wrote At Dawn They Sleep all the way through Hardening of the Arteries lyrically. And then Tom wrote At Dawn They Sleep, and that's really weird. Tom wrote the lyrics to At Dawn They Sleep and Crypts of Eternity entirely. Or not entirely, but like helped writing them. But the two hardest ones. I guess they basically told Tom, like, we'll take care of the music. You're going to have to put lyrics over this fucking shit.
Yeah. I think Tom is still good. It's not like on what's it fucking Seasons in the Abyss where his like lyric writing gets really fucking cheesy. I think here Jeff still has enough control over him in that department.
That everything going forward starts to get cheesy from this is like this is like the last kind of like twilight before the rock star stuff begins going forward, where there's kind of this feeling of we're too big to talk about other bands. Because I'm sure that they had a lot of other bands that they liked at this time, more than just Merciful Fate, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and all the punk bands that Jeff likes. I'm sure that there are other bands that they could bring up. But it was really going forward after this that I remember reading an interview that they said that if they had the choice of like a band to bring out on tour with them, they said that they'd want to bring out Joe Satriani.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes complete sense.
Because they would want, like, I suppose, maybe something different or really something really technical guitar wise, but not in the same vein of like metal as what they're doing. But no, you're completely right when it comes to Tom's vocal performance on this album. He starts doing all of the fast vocal lines that, you know, he's fitting like really what would I say, like really dense lines into a small space. But he also still kind of maintains a lot of the high screams that he was doing on Show No Mercy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very varied because I don't know, he managed to like maintain that like perfect tone, you know, even something like Darkness Descends, you know, where the vocals just literally the guy, you know, it just sounds like he's ranting, you know what I mean? Like no, there's like no grit, there's no kind of like effect on the voice, right? It just sounds some like
he's speaking literally with his like talking voice almost.
Exactly. And Tom is like really the first guy. I mean, him and Hetfield as well, and Mustaine. I mean, to really like, especially in extreme metal, to really feel what he's saying, and he maintains that grit, that character, and it's like very massive sounding. You know, he doesn't have the deepest voice,
but it's loud.
It's loud. It's powerful. It's commanding. Fantastic diction as well, which would, you know, obviously influence guys like David Vincent a lot.
The most like important thing is aesthetically, from the album cover to the themes of the album, how the album both begins and ends, and then throwing in there like Tom's voice. Like, it does sound like Virgil taking Dante through hell and like telling him all of these fucking things, but in a way that relates more to somebody that would be on the street and not necessarily, you know, as prosaic as Dante's Inferno. You know, we're talking about I mean, he's talking about horrific topics incredibly early. Like, when is the only, like, do you have an earlier source for any band talking about necrophilia?
No, I'm trying to. None of the new wave British heavy metal bands, except for Iron Maiden, even dared to touch something so brutal. And even that, they didn't go that far at that point yet.
It goes beyond bands. I don't even think the news was really talking about something that abhorrent.
No, I think Sallow was already out. Maybe they ended up getting drunk and watching Sallow.
Was there necrophilia in that? Because I've seen that only like a couple times.
No, there was no
like
necrophilia. I'm not sure what they could have fucking. I mean, they could have been. It could have been anything. You know, I think these guys were so creative.
Yeah,
you know,
but again, my whole point is that we're talking about. I mean, Kill Again. We're talking about, you know, a serial killer getting back out there to, you know, do what he loves best. And Dante Sleep is about vampires, but spoken in a way that's not. It's not cheesy. It's not lame or anything like that. It does kind of, it talks about them as if they were real. Necrophiliac. I'm trying to remember. Oh God, I'm drawing a fucking blank right now. The fifth Praise of Death, Necrophiliac, Crypts of Eternity, Hardening of the Arteries. I mean, what band is talking about diabetes this early?
Yeah, exactly.
Fucking Hardening of the Arteries.
What's really impressive, I think, as well, I think they may be the first band to really have that kind of like extreme metal language. You know what I mean? That kind of King James translation of the Bible into metal lyrics.
The Latinate, I remember the way that it was put to me and the way that I read about it was talking in an entirely Latinate format. You know, Suffocation would eventually become the definitive experts of it, like Effigy of the Forgotten, you know, Seeds of the Suffering, Liege of Inveracity. I mean, there's even stuff where they're doing the same thing Suffocation would end up doing, which is making up words. There's words that don't exist on this album.
Baysides too as well, bro. Revocate.
Oh yeah, yeah. The Agitator, yeah. It's just entirely about. It's more like the bark syllabically of like what those words allow. The same with Revocate the Agitator. It's just about the bark and the bite of the syllables in that.
Yeah, but we understand what it means. So, you know, I love it when bands kind of like force their way into having their own language and it fits. You know, rappers have been doing this since like the late 70s. I think it's fantastic. You know, I think someone here in the band definitely has a lot of experience with the Old Testament. I'm not sure who it would be. Maybe Tom because of his religious inclinations, but it shows up.
Well, what's interesting is like somebody, I remember once somebody was saying, you know, in support of Hell Awaits by Slayer in a Christian context, like that's just the Old Testament.
Yeah,
is what this album is. And
you look at the Devil's, the relationship with the devil is very indicative of the Old Testament because in the Old Testament, you know, when, for example, you know, when Raph interviewed the guy Justin Sledge from Esoterica, and they were talking about the first Black Sabbath song, right? The devil as the left hand of God, as God's hitman, not as the tempter, not as the one who forces you to stray from the path, right?
The devil is God's employee.
Exactly, literally.
In the book of Job, he literally is like, hey, fuck up this guy's life, because metaphorically we want to say, like, no matter how bad it gets, if you maintain your faith, you know, tenfold, you'll have all of these things. But you'll lose absolutely every single solitary thing in your life, and that might have post-traumatic stress disorder, but who gives a shit about that?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, bro.
Yeah, no, that's entirely true. Like, Hell Awaits is like the entire. I mean, it could be in a literal sense, it could be in a metaphorical sense, in a sociological sense. I mean, you know, this is why it's one of my favorite shirts, and when people read it, like, not that I ever encounter really anybody that ever reads shirts or is shocked about shirts, but when I've talked about it, and people have said, I can't believe you're wearing a shirt that says Hell Awaits. I'm like, well, I mean, isn't that what's going on? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you're completely right, yeah. If you don't believe in the blood of Christ, hell does await you. Like...
But the thing is they made it, like, also... They did do the thing, which was to take Dante's, like, vision and expound upon it. I mean, hold up. Like... I mean, it is probably... Oh, dude, that really... Yeah. This is one of the... Let me see if I can get it without the fucking glare.
Yeah, no, it's not possible.
Greatest fucking covers ever. I mean, I remember when I saw this, all I could think was, how cool would it be to be one of these demons? Yeah. And you've got this crazy bone staff, and you're ostensibly falling through the depths of hell, which are probably endless. There is no bottom, especially with the idea taken from Greek mythology, Tartarus, which means the bottom, which would take fucking forever to get to. And then these two dudes are ripping somebody apart. Like, I can only imagine, like, over time, like, this is what you must become down there. So it's like, they made it cool. Like, when you see this, you're like, oh, I'd love to do that. Yeah. Or on the back, when you flip to, like, all their band photos and shit, you know, Carrie's still got his really highly expensive BC Rich Mockingbird Shorty. You know, Jeff's playing his Les Paul. Tom has his wave bass. And then I love that they each have, like, images of them like they've turned back to look at the camera or something like that. But it mirrors the front where it's like, you know, these guys are playing to these guys.
Yeah.
This cover is like, it's perfect. I remember when I saw this, I'm like, you know, I even got this shirt like 13 years ago. My bass player got it for me for my birthday. Yeah, this cover is perfect. And if I remember correctly, there's even like a fucking I'm not gonna open that. Well, I guess I could open it. There is a like, have you ever looked on the inside?
No. So basically, I've got the first press cassette, but the European edition done. It was done by some Polish label, kind of like pretty small, crappy J card. Yeah.
I don't know that this one has it,
Yeah,
but
aesthetically the album is perfect. Do you have any idea on who did the artwork? Oh, that's gorgeous.
oh god, shit, I should have this information memorized. I hate putting records back. Okay, I know I should be putting it behind it. I know there's gonna be some vinyl dickhead Nazi dudes. You need to put the shit behind it. I don't play them anyway.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and look at that. The artwork, Albert Kuhler.
Damn, has he done anything else?
He did. He did Live Undead.
Okay.
That was the only other thing he did, and then he died 4 years ago of heart failure, which is appropriate since fucking hardening of the arteries. That is hysterical. The guy who did the painting for the album, the last song is Hardening of the Arteries, died of a heart failure.
Yeah, that definitely.
Oh, God. Yeah, no, that's kind of weird. That the only two things that this guy did were the Live Undead picture disc, and then, which is like not even a real live album. That was done in the studio. But
yeah, like Judas Priest's Unleashed in the East, which is obviously.
Oh wait, that was done in the studio?
Well, maybe not quite done in the studio, but a lot of the tracks were redone in the studio. A lot of it.
Oh well, yeah. There's gonna be like overdubs and shit like that. No, the Live Undead, it was done in a studio. Like that's how much of a studio it was done in. They played it in a studio live. That's the only live part about it.
I think the funny thing as well is I can't remember on what Metallica single it was, but there was a B-side that had Seek and Destroy Live, which was actually a studio version of Seek and Destroy with claps added in and people cheering.
There's so many bands that have done that. The best version of Mother by Danzig is done that way. The Mother 93 version, which is played faster. There's like multiple different versions. There's the 88 one, the 93 one, then the 93 one with the crowd, and then eventually later they did like a music video version where he says thank you at the end, and that's the definitive version. That's the one I saw when I was growing up. But I mean, and speaking of Slayer, I mean, weirdly, like the band that they would rather have been on tour with would have been Danzig.
Yeah, I mean,
you know, both bands being on America. I guess the way that they thought about themselves was like, we are the be all end all of this genre. What is the point of bringing anybody else that plays in the same genre as we do?
Yeah, exactly. I think that was, in terms of PR and the direction they wanted to go in. That's literally it. It's like Slayer had, which it is true to an extent in terms of like normie culture and how normies see Slayer. I mean, people don't listen to metal. But yeah, Slayer see themselves as the kind of ultimate end, and I think after Hell Awaits, they try to not really sell out, but you know, kind of go in a softer direction that it's not quite as extreme.
Yeah, had they gone forward with the path of this album, where they made the songs like even more complex, I mean, it would have alienated all of the people that they have to say are fans now. Yeah. Like most people that I know of that are into Slayer, like true Slayer fans, don't really like this album, by the way.
That's so weird.
Yeah. They would prefer, obviously, like the ones that you'll hear are going to be the next three, Rain and Blood, South of Heaven, and Seasons in the Abyss. Rarely do I hear people talking about the first two that are just strictly like Slayer fans. Now, if you're more into like metal, and even if you're a guitar player, you'll hear about the first two. But even then, you'll hear some people say like, "Oh, I don't like the production," and it's just bullshit. I mean, it's just stupid not to like something. There's still a lot of stuff going on breeding the spawn, as we've waxed on infinitely about. I mean, it's the same thing with this album. It's sparse, but it's also like it's thin rather, but it's still like a massive fucking album.
Yeah, exactly.
And
you can easily focus in on any instrument easily enough. It's true. It's like compared to Raining Blood. They had Rick Rubin as the producer when he was still in his prime. Well, in his prime or whatever that was.
When he would actually produce things.
Yeah, exactly. When he knew what he was doing. And so yeah, sure. That had. I mean, that was in many ways the kind of basis of how like modern metal would see itself in terms of production. That really kickstarted everything. But still, this one it does force you to really engage with the music properly. You can't just like passively listen to it and hear bullshit noise solo and your fast riff and your tupa 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 and you're happy, right?
Yeah.
You actually have to like pay attention to what's going on, preferably be in a somewhat calm environment, and just really let this album take you, because it's so short. It's so compact in terms of quality, right? There is no filler. You can't allow yourself to drift away for even like half a minute at this point.
No, I mean, with this album in particular, I mean, it is longer, I think, by Slayer standards, 37 minutes. I mean, that's literally more than 10 minutes longer than Rain and Blood, but it's still not that long. There's still tons of fast moments in each of these songs. You have 3 songs over 6 minutes. You have like things that they never did again, like bookending the album with the same type of riff. They would do really weird chords. I mean, a lot of this is the Merciful. They've talked a lot about this, but it's the Merciful Fate influence. I almost want to know if they were influenced by like Voivod at this point, because there's a lot of those types of chords being used.
Probably maybe the same kind of stuff that Voivod were listening to themselves. I seriously doubt they were listening. I think the last new band that they were into was Metallica, because I know they were big fans of Metallica, especially on like.
Well, and not even like any of the albums. Like Harry would talk a lot about how great Dave's playing was, and like he didn't have to look at his guitar while playing. I think these guys obviously went more with, I would say, with Merciful Fate. Maybe they had like Defenders of the Faith, but it was mainly all of like the extremity of the. And this is something that I just put together now. I think that so many people took so much more extremity from all of the punk and hardcore bands, because that was more extreme at that time period than any of the metal bands.
Oh yeah, definitely. We've got a little message from Ollie who wants me to read this out. So he says,
Sure.
Slayer Hell Awaits is an unquestionably fundamental work of extreme music, one of the most timeless and enduring, with its influence appearing everywhere in the great works that followed. Onward to Golgotha, to name one. Great record out of many that are indebted to Hell Awaits. OG slams abound, and they are just as crushing as anything else within the last 40 years. The slams in At Dawn They Sleep and Praise of Death are fucked up. A pillar of extreme metal music if there ever was one. Yeah, completely agree with this. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like there is
very
so
well.
much
Thank
to get to. I mean, just the slams, so any kind of like percussive guitar moment here, there is so much fucking to go through.
Well, the fact that they also applied it in like a classical sense, that they used in a cello rondo there, like
yes, that's fucking incredible.
Dun, 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 and then that's like suffocation, and then I mean, that's that takes a lot of coordination to do, and these guys were doing the most insane thing about this band, because there's so many shows that I have around that time period. The one from Eindhoven, and then another one from '85. they were playing these songs faster than the album. So, I mean, they're just playing something like At Dawn They Sleep, which has build-ups faster, which is just insane that they were able to do. I mean, and they're the coolest thing about the set at that time period, it was very clear that they were tired of a lot of the stuff from Show No Mercy. So they played everything from Hell Awaits. They played every song. And it's amazing. Like, and so you got this hour and a half of like everything that was great about Slayer at that time. And then they never did it again.
Oh, that's a shame. but yeah, I think one of the most important things, and this isn't discussed enough, but you know, anyone who's a genuine fan of this album knows, this is really when kind of metal like really broke out of the mold of the what I like to call the Metallica song structure, which is essentially a really extended form of like, AB, verse, AB.
New wave of British heavy metal. Yeah.
I mean, Metallica did so much with it. They made it really fucking interesting. Megadeth kept on that same path. But Slayer fucking broke out of it almost completely. Especially here.
Yeah.
Like, it's incredible. Just the way At Dawn They Sleep, it works, you have the death metal classic. The kind of the AB into, your C, D, E, C, whatever you want, right?
Well, the thing that it was so influential to death metal, the thing that was so important was the fact that you would have like if you had AB, you also had like A sub 1 and then B sub 1, where you'd have different tails, and then you'd always have that one riff that only played for like a bar, and then it would never be played again, connected, and like it would be used to connect something else. They were doing things where it's like, oh yeah, this thing is only going to be played this one time, never to be played again, but make sure you get that 100% down when we play it. And they would rehearse this album. If you look up the demos for it, they would rehearse this album with no vocals, which told me that they cared more about like the instrumental aspect than say to focus on the vocals. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the vocals were added in later and then they were also done in the studio separate from the bass track.
Oh yeah, completely agree.
One of the last times Tom even played the bass too. I don't know if you know this, but he didn't play the bass in the studio after Seasons in the Abyss.
What was it, his brother or something? From what I heard.
No, it was Harry.
Oof. Jesus fucking Christ.
After Seasons in the Abyss, like, yeah, Tom never played bass in the studio again.
Damn. Fucking hell. That's a bit of a, what's his name, Paolo Jr. kind of situation.
Oh, no. Well, yeah, we liked him because he had a nice bass. That was the whole argument for getting him in the band, and they kept him in the band. The first time he actually played bass with them was Chaos AD in the studio.
Hilarious, dude.
Like, I imagine that dude had like a heart attack. It's like, we're actually gonna play it live in the studio. It's so weird to think that who actually recorded it? Was it Max or was it not Igor?
Gyro? Oh no,
no.
Kissa. Andreas. Was that his name?
Andreas, yeah.
Probably a bit of both, I mean, both those guys were very, very good at one point.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. So yeah, let's go a bit more into the riffs themselves, right? So Show No Mercy still has a lot of the kind of like latent heavy metal melodies. It's not quite as fully chromatic as this one. Obviously all those guys were kind of leaning in onto in the chromatic side of things. Metallica were really starting to get quite a bit more chromatic on Ride the Lightning around this time. But this really pushes it to a whole new fucking level.
It was the first time where the chromatic bits weren't used to just merely like connect a segment together. It was actually used as the melody. Yeah. Or one of the first times where they used, and that's kind of the death metal sound where you could hear that in a song like Fight Till Death, where there were parts used in a tremolo pick fashion that were chromatic, that weren't merely the connectors. But this is the like first real time that you're going to hear both chromatic and dissonant, diminished sounds as the riffs themselves to get that kind of like evil type of sound.
Yeah, but and because they they're coming from that heavy metal background, they're still figuring out, okay, we've got all these chromatic notes or whatever it is, like this shit sounds evil, but it's got to sound like a melody. You know what I mean? It's like, I know a riff that Kerry absolutely adores is "Don't Burn the Witch" by Venom. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah,
like very simple chromatic descent, but it works. And this is like essentially that idea just like pushed to its absolute extreme.
yeah, and you're talking about when he played it with Marty Friedman on Rock
Exactly,
Food.
yes.
Yeah,
And Marty,
exactly
what a fucking fantastic player, man. That guy just harmonized that brilliantly.
Yeah, that was done in fourth.
Yeah. I love seeing Marty, have a bit of excitement when he plays metal, because he rarely has it anymore for that kind of music.
No, and he does still like really heavy music. It was just that he kind of wanted to do like go really heavy with Megadeth, which Dave wasn't going to do. But getting back to Slayer, yeah, no, yeah, the Venom, I mean, it started creeping in where it wouldn't just be like with Don't Burn the Witch. You think about like the very next riff of that, like that whole thing at the very end, it kind of like connects it. But instead of that, Carrie's actually just playing that, or would be playing something like that to actually play as the main riff. It's not just the connector. It's like, he would do that in Kill Again is one of the best, and one of the best covers is Angel Corpse did a cover of Kill Again on their cover album Iron Blood and Blasphemy. They did theirs like hyper fast, obviously, but there's riffs in there that you can still hear the melody of it, like, I mean, just from the top of dun 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 I mean, that's still a melody. I mean, it's not just entirely like where war metal would do open 1, 3, 4 in whatever like ad nauseum context. I mean, these guys were actually playing chords even like way up high on the neck, even.
Yeah, especially even on At Dawn They Sleep, which I think it's everyone's favorite album, favorite song, and that might be the best fucking Slayer song ever, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it has everything you need from extreme metal. That song precisely. The more I think about it, the more I realize.
It's a perfect song, which is why I think that it might be one of the most well-written songs of the album, which is why they might continue to play that one along with the title track, obviously, because that began the album. You really don't hear anything outside of that, like maybe Kill Again or Necrophiliac. My favorite moment of the album, though, is in Necrophiliac at the very top, where you actually hear when the main riff starts, that really hyper fast riff, you can hear in the background Jeff saying "fuck" because it's going by so quickly at the top. That like that song is like, I mean, I know everybody heard that song probably and ran with it when it came to death metal and black metal going forward.
Oh, yeah,
we can do that. I think that's one of the most important things when it comes to an album like this is the permission. Like, oh, we can do that. It's okay to do this musically. Because there probably was an incentive to keep it within like a really diatonic key earlier, especially earlier for them in the career. But with this album, they kind of like blow the gates off the hinges. Like, you can do whatever you want. Except not major key, obviously, but you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, and as well, no one was really kind of like, I mean, I want to say tremolo picking. Well, it's technically be alternate picking, but just kind of like fully, that kind of tremolo picked.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly, guitar line, especially the way it kind of alternates on the title track. Between kind of a very standard, more standard Slayer riff shape into the tremolo pick, which was something that every fucking band would even do. Fall from Grace is fucking known for that by Morbid Angel, another perfect 10 out of 10 song. And I just think like no, like who could have done this before them? Because I'm thinking like, it's something that's so foundational to what extreme metal is now, but no one was doing it back then.
Well, one of the most important aspects was the fact that all of the speed metal bands were merely playing like the low E or the A and riding off of that.
Mm.
Player finally took it to where like you could play it like a violin line,
Yeah.
where you could stay on like a note and then do other melodies with that, and like your right hand following that, like you would bow a violin. They were definitely one of the first ones to do that, because like you still had Metallica doing what they were doing, which is like beating the shit out of the low E or even the A string, and then doing percussive notes with that. Slayer decided to actually do phrases with it.
Yeah, but I can't think where the hell would that like come from, because that completely changed the game. Obviously because just before that we have Metallica, but the way Metallica were doing it, it's even in blues, it's such a fucking staple. Bands like Diamond Head were doing that already. Even Saxon or whatever, the da 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 da,
Yeah,
that. But just the idea of like, I do not have to stick to that E or to that annoying A string. I can just fucking choose whatever I want as my root note and just like go off on it.
I think it was also just the delineation of thinking like in a key. It was just like I can write wherever.
Yeah, I mean,
Because with that you're thinking in E or A, but Carey doesn't even know keys. So he knows that he could creatively, I mean, I'm sure it was more Jeff, because Jeff is like the more creative of the two guys. Even though Carey has more technique, Jeff would end up with like arthritis like 10 years later. But Jeff was probably the one that was being the more adventurous of the two, where he's taking in like he has all these punk influences and he's applying them to metal. I really don't know where it would come from, where they're both doing like lines where you would tremolo pick multiple different notes to create a melody. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. Has anyone else done it before within a metal context? Obviously, everyone knows the pulp, whatever, Dick Dale, Pulp Fiction, whatever, that was before, right? That was another big example of that. But
it was in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm thinking in terms purely of metal.
No, and this should definitely be something studied. I know a lot of people try to track down like the first blast beat. This should be something that's tracked down. Like the first time like tremolo pick lines were used to define a melody, like define a phrase, as instead of doing it like the percussive way of doing it. It had to be like some combination of like the extremity of like Merciful Fate, also possibly they might have been listening to Bathory at this time period, because you can see pictures of them later with Bathory.
But yeah.
So, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you, and I've always wondered that the entire time, because I also kind of quiz people on like, especially when I'm talking about writing certain lines, I would ask people like, you would hear that line, why wouldn't you write particularly something similar to that line? Because most people still think of the idea of using the low E as the line that you would write off of, when really you could write anywhere.
You know what I think it is? I think it comes to mind, Merciful Fate, Don't Break the Oath, A Dangerous Meeting, that has that kind of idea. It's nowhere near as fast, but I think that's maybe this would be like Slayer would be the genesis, but that like in how it came to be. But I think Merciful Fate were doing it, just a bit before on Don't Break the Oath. So,
yeah. Oh no, you can hear that immediately, like with that very first type of riff. I mean, all of the like labyrinthine type of riffing styles with that.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it's always crazy. The closer you kind of get to the mid '80s, when you go back in time, you realize that like this was like metal was in a fucking arms race where, from like '83 to '86, the whole game just immediately turned on its head, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
by 86, unfortunately, it was kind of thought of as like Rain and Blood would then be the kind of manual, unfortunately.
Mm.
People would hold that up as like, we gotta be able to top this. And that's how you end up with something like the later Dark Angel albums, which prioritize like, we've got 367 riffs, but not a song.
Yeah, 246 riffs, and half of the riffs were just like,
Yeah.
you know. That's, but yeah, but you know, no, you know, speaking of Rain and Blood, I think one thing that allows like a song like Angel of Death to work is just how they approach the breakdown. You know, one very hard picking and just very precise accentuations on the offbeats. Right, I'm thinking of like the Angel of Death breakdown, but those ideas were really like shown on Hell Awaits with a lot more variety, a lot more complexity, but maybe because the production wasn't quite as strong enough that you don't really hear that kind of on that.
No, Rick, the thing that he did that he enabled Slayer to kind of go through the stratosphere really was the fact that he made it to where the picking and the guitar playing would become that like kind of muscular sound that DSI would eventually kind of take going forward. And it was so dry that it was just, I mean, you can only hear three things on that album: the guitars, the vocals, and certain drums. That's it. It's simple.
Yeah.
And that's, I think even King Fowley has talked about like, that was what the big deal with the drums was. You could hear the boom tap of like the snare and the fucking hi-hat and the kick drums. Before you couldn't really, it wasn't as defined. It wasn't just like highlighted and then, made the point of the album. I would even go so far as to say that makes Hell Awaits a more musical album than Rain and Blood.
Every idea that existed in Rain and Blood existed on Hell Awaits, but except that like how would I say this? Except, Hell Awaits subtly, like, not subtly, hint at things. It hints at ideas. You have to focus. Raining Blood was the fucking porno version of it, where everything was fully on display, like the ideas that they wanted to show. Whereas here, I'm once again, I'm thinking about the way that they're playing with the offbeats on At Dawn They Sleep, or the fucking breakdown in Necrophiliac or Praise of Death. Just like, had they had maybe even bigger production, this album would have been bigger than Raining Blood. But then again, I like the fact that every single thing is audible once again. And so all these little things, I'm sure the breakdown could use a bit more bass, could follow the kind of like production standards that became really popular. But I just love that whenever you really focus on this album, there are already so many details. Like stuff that no one was doing before them, like literally no one. Well, to that extent, and you get all these ideas, and you can hear them in bands, incorporating them, making them their own thing, all the way up to like the mid 2000s.
I think another thing that did kind of hurt the album was the fact that they immediately jumped ship from Metal Blade to American Recordings, which obviously was like to the benefit of themselves. But then immediately the next year they have Rain and Blood out. So it goes 85, 86. And so Rain and Blood kind of like overshadows Hell Awaits in a way. I mean, it's literally not even a full like 2 years. It's barely like a year and a half.
Exactly.
But when you look at it chronologically, it's just like, oh, that was old Slayer.
Yeah. I mean, what else have we forgotten that was like used really?
The solos.
Yes, the solos. This is before the fucking stupid memes came about.
Yeah. They, on the first album, they both had really melodic, but just kind of weirdly played solos. This was the first time where both of them had a Kaler tremolo. And they both were like, well, let's just make it sound like people that are tortured. And it was to the benefit of the music and the history of everything going forward, because everybody wanted to make these sounds going forward. and it fits the music better than say like I would say the most ill-fitting solos that have ever been over anything, and I know a lot of people might like drag me for this, is any of Ralph Santola's solos for Deicide don't fit.
Oh, and what was it? Stench of
Stench
Redemption.
of Redemption.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But then here,
It's
there's a difference between the noise bursts that King and Hanneman were doing compared to Trevor Perez on
Trevor was only the rhythm guitar player.
okay, whoever did the solos on fucking on Slowly We Rot, right? There's a big difference. There's still a lot of musicality. There's still a lot of little
That was
links.
Alan West, but I
Yeah,
think the solos were also another dude too, but I'm not sure.
yeah. I'm saying like there's a big difference between the kind of bursts of noise that were present here, or even on Rain in Blood, or on the fucking Beastie Boys song, which has to be one of the worst solos I've ever heard.
Oh my god! Well, there's two Beastie Boys songs that he did that not a lot of people. I don't know why this information isn't more public, but he does the solos on both "Fight for Your Right" and "No Sleep Till Brooklyn."
Oh yeah, damn. But the No Sleep Till Brooklyn one is really the one that fucking shocks me the most because of how bad it is.
Yeah, even he said that it's not the work of a virtuoso.
Yeah, it's just unfitting. But and he, obviously Trey Azagtov would like take this style and push it to its absolute limit. But the way that, especially they've got like kind of what's their fucking face, Tipton and KK Downing duality.
Yeah.
They're not both trying to be fucking KK Downing on victims of changes, right? They
Well, the interesting thing is you could, and I hate to use Pokemon as an example, but you could look at evolutions of the both of them. You've got Glenn and KK, King and Hanneman, and then the Hoffman brothers.
Yeah.
You've got three different generations of dudes with blonde and brunette hair doing wild solos. All three using Kahlers, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Not Floyd Roses.
That's crazy. God, I hate the fucking Floyd Rose. But that's another conversation.
I love the Floyd Rose, but it's just like the way that some people use it is not good. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was saying, but here, and this is what a lot of people struggle to understand is just like, for especially Hanneman solos, the way he will like start with like very impressive kind of like rap, like small melodies, very fast. Though obviously,
oh yeah,
that could have even been, had they played them like 2 octaves lower, they could have been riffs themselves because that's how good these melodies are. And then he introduces the noise, like this really kind of climactic thing, right?
They both, I mean, were still like they still have like really really great back and forth solos on this album. It wasn't until like Angel of Death where it became the meme of like we're going to do these almost like micro solos back and forth. I think there's like 5 on Angel of Death that go back and forth, like Hanneman King, Hanneman King, Hanneman. But on this album, there were a lot where they had like almost like written solos because you could hear them live and they're still playing them. I mean, funnily enough, like note for note correctly, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, because there's still a level of musicality. They're still playing little melodies. You can tell that these guys can actually play their guitars. They know what they're doing. Like the noise, sure, it sounds wild, but it's still very controlled. It just fits with the underlying riffs perfectly.
Oh yeah. And going forward again, it was like how you drew kind of like a really great I suppose image with the idea of porn. Going forward, it was more like show, don't tell.
Yeah.
And just it was all on display, just like we're gonna do all of the stuff that you guys want with nothing you don't want, rather than on this album, we're going to have dynamics. There are no dynamics going forward necessarily. I mean, you could call a breakdown a dynamic, but it also is like with Angel of Death it just comes to a full stop and then that by itself and then everybody comes back in with the harmony. Yeah. On this one, I mean, they're doing accelerando, decelerados. I mean, they're doing very musical things. Going forward, it is as boneheaded as full stop, one guitar, then the rest of the band. And they made a whole career on it.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of bands, unfortunately, really took that and ran with it. But, here's, I mean, realistically, Defeated Sanity are like maybe the only ones to really expand on that idea of accelerating, decelerating. Even so, obviously, the Defeated Sanity did it with a lot more complexity, but just that kind of basic idea is something that I wish we heard a lot more in metal during that time.
Oh well, I mean, you're talking about like an expansive, like almost like 40 years.
Yeah,
Um, I think, I mean, there's bands that have definitely done the Hell Awaits thing in both black and death metal. That you could obviously say any of the things that we've talked about, Legion or Onward to Golgotha,
do they
or
have those kind of like not like accelerandos and decelerandos? Like, do they really do them as like? Because it always felt to me that the idea within Black and Death, right, is that every riff has its very specific tempo, and you kind of mix and match those like riffs. Where, if you know what I mean, in that
oh, were you saying they're more like building blocks rather than like linked
exactly.
together, where you can have like it takes being like a really experienced band to actually pull off like we've done programming where I've had click tracks program in for my stuff, program in that type of thing. But it is a pain, which is probably why it's easier to just do it live and have a band like that. And I'm sure that that there are bands that have done it, but I do understand it's much easier to just come to a full stop, have one guitar do, the riff, and then everybody come in on a harmony. Like that's very easy. But to do what they did here, which is probably why they didn't do it ever again going forward, is to be like, okay, we got to slow down
Exactly.
in a natural way.
Damn the guy from Gothenburg who invented going from E to C. Lol.
What?
That was a message from MS. Dude, yeah, Gothenburg did kind of ruin what Slayer were going for.
Oh, with like Slaughter of the Soul or something?
Yeah, I'm guessing that's what he means.
Yeah.
But you know what? Come to think of it, because this guy was talking about Gothenburg. When I think about it, because obviously metalcore was like initially in the late '80s to like throughout the '90s was essentially hardcore plus Slayer, not even metal really. And I think that a lot of those ideas of accelerating and decelerating through a riff were actually found more during metalcore, and in many ways, like bands like Converge and Integrity did a lot of stuff with those ideas that metal bands didn't quite catch on to.
Yeah, because it was. I think the reason why is in metal, there was kind of like a line drawn in the sand, like you have to do it this way, or that their bands are probably adamant, like we're gonna do the slow down. They're not gonna do the slow down. We're gonna do the full stops and the full starts.
Yeah. But of course,
Whereas sometimes outside of metal, like you were saying with hardcore, you can get more artistic or musical with it because they're not working with the exact same framework. Though I will say, I think something like Blessed Are the Sick is also doing what Hell Awaits was doing, but in a studio format where they're actually making a very tight album, but still doing a lot of the crazy things that an album like that was doing.
Yeah. I mean, Morbid Angel was just kind of relying on Soundaval and Azagthought's really weird internal clock. All the way up to like Domination. No, there was no metronome, no like fucking MIDI grid or whatever.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the way they kind of like go through riffs, like this really organized way that Slayer was doing it in, no one quite like really did it right in metal for a long time. And that just shows you that sometimes like a lot of these old albums, everyone thinks like, yeah, we know them by heart, and then you realize like, shit, if Hello White, if it took 40 years or so for some of these ideas to really fucking shine through, maybe we're missing on something. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't be surprised. And obviously, Slayer have no fucking incentive to talk about this shit. Like, they've been out of like trying to make music, art as music. They've been out of that game for a really fucking long time at this point now.
They've been making product for a very long time. Like, go listen to the latest Kerry King album if you can stomach it. It's the exact same thing that we were talking about earlier. It's gonna be riding the low E flat string. and it's just going to be horrible dynamics, everything really cheesy and melodramatic. It's awful.
Yeah.
He just makes products for the people he knows are going to buy it because it has his name on it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the fact that he has a brand called Kerry fucking King, I mean, he lost all his integrity when he lost his hair.
Yeah, when he really wanted to be the kind of I'm Kerry King the brand, and like
Yeah.
it's crazy. Metallica were bigger than him, and obviously sure Lars was like wanted to be a brand, but none of them pushed themselves as much as Kerry King did.
Lars never had a brand. He didn't ever have like the Lars Ulrich T-shirts. The Kerry has the KFK brand, and it's all over his guitars. It's all over everything.
God damn it. But yeah, I think one last thing I wanted to talk about is that I never understood this meme, but I think it's something that I've seen a lot go around. A lot of people accuse Slayer of just having, open string runs, just 000. And I think the only time they ever really do that, well, here is that sometimes they'll use it, maybe to start a song or between two riffs, but like as a way to build up tension. But this idea that all they do is play the low E string is just, I never understood it really.
Well, again, it's because people know Rain and Blood more, and they do that on Rain and Blood.
Yeah, true.
I mean, they do that everywhere going forward. I mean, think about, they even do the song format for, like, the albums going forward, where they would have a song like Angel of Death or Silent Scream or War Ensemble be the first or second song to kick off, something really fast, even like Killing Fields off of Divine Intervention, which is where I stop. But I can't listen to anything going past that album.
Yeah, I mean, World Painted Blood had some weird ideas, I think, that I kind of enjoyed to an extent.
Just ideas, though.
Yeah, exactly.
No songs.
Nothing. I think maybe the last full song by Slayer I enjoy in a kind of like childish way is Cult, Jihad, whatever, I don't fucking know. Something on.
For me, it would be songs like Payback or Threshold or Here Comes the Pain, or just kind of really goofy type of songs that I like, but it's because of nostalgia more so than and familiarity more so than anything. If I put on Slayer, it's going to be like Hell Awaits or Show No Mercy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they South of Heaven is another one I love, another one that we could really do a big analysis on as well.
I meant Hell Awaits. I'm sorry, Hell Awaits or Show No Mercy.
Yeah, but it's a funny thing. So yeah, anyway, I think we've pretty much hit everything that we had to say. We've touched on all the details. I mean, there's probably so much more on this album.
The only thing now is to do is to just go listen to it.
Yeah, literally. Any concluding words?
God listens to Slayer.
Yeah. All right. Well, Hell Awaits. Thanks again for joining me, Mac, and thanks to everyone who showed up. And we'll be
it's a death metal album. It's the first death metal album, and I'm just glad we finally got to do this.
We have proven that it is the first death metal album. I will fight anyone. If someone can fucking prove me that there was a death metal album, a fully fledged death metal album before this, I will happily pay you $500 via PayPal. I am literally putting out this challenge. Fucking prove
if you literally replace the vocals, which you could do with the rehearsals, it would just be, I mean, it's clear.
Yeah, it's clear. I will fucking pay $500 to whoever can prove to me that there was a death metal album before this one.
All right.
See you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.